So I invite you on to talk about trauma and trauma-informed therapy and all the themes associated to that. You started off in kind of in the birthing world as a doula, and I think you call yourself a midwife of the soul now. What's the sort of connection from that early part of your career to what you're doing now?
Yeah, thank you. That is often an entire podcast conversation, but I'll see if I can do a Coles Notes version.
Mm.
And I entered the world of, you could say, birth, midwifery, physiological birth during the pregnancy of my first child 23 years ago.
Mm.
And that just kind of opened a door that, it was as if the curtain had been lifted in a world that I had not tapped into. And this is very common for moms who find themselves pregnant, and all of a sudden there's this whole other world behind the curtain of birth. So that kind of catapulted me into that world, and I've worn many hats. I ran a brick and mortar store called Earth Mother in 2001, and that was a community hub for families, everything birth, parenting, and beyond that was natural parenting related. And so that kind of started me on the journey of learning about childbirth education, and then becoming trained as a holistic doula, and then learning from some of the radicals in the world of birth, and then training in a traditional midwifery style, apprenticeship style, with a mentor for many, many years. And then, just to fast forward to where did that bring me, or how did that get me to where I am today? So through all of that time period, I was motivated by the same thing, which was how can we provide the best possible experience for a new mom from birth into postpartum into parenthood? And what can we do as birth professionals to mitigate harm and violence in birth? So back then it was called obstetrical violence. Today we call it birth trauma. And so I was always motivated by this desire to show that there was a different way and birth didn't have to be painful, harmful, and or leave moms and parents feeling utterly powerless and or in these states of devastation in the postpartum. So we'll get into it later today in our conversation, I know, but basically that motivated me, has stayed with me. And then through my own healing journey and my own understanding of trauma, which then led me to understand the neurobiology of healing, what happened is my understanding of birth physiology and my understanding of healing physiology merged, and they were both kind of saying the same thing. And so I merged those two together and kind of bridged that gap in the childbirth world of birth trauma and postpartum mood disorders, and also just healing from trauma, and kind of made that link. And that is what motivated me then to create the Healing After Birth program, and then the book that I wrote, which then launched me into, specializing in postpartum care, in particular trauma-informed care, and now this more nervous system informed approach. So it was all kind of the same thread throughout, and here I am today.
I should mention that you're a registered clinical counselor. When did you enter that world?
Yeah, well, you could say I started that world back in the 90s when I was in grad school for performance psychology, actually. So I had completed 2 years of graduate work in the field of sports psychology. So I've always been training for this role. And then I burnt out, struggled from depression, got into some conflicts with the advisory board, and walked away from that completion of that program, and then was pregnant. So it took me, almost 18 years to return. And after my journey of kind of finding myself and healing myself and bringing all those pieces back together again, I went back to grad school and